But I think this has continued since 2015 because the Nigerian state has not been too active in dealing with the problems. People get killed and no consequences.
Welcome to Global Dispatches, a podcast for the foreign policy and global development communities and anyone who wants a deeper understanding of what is driving events in the world today. I'm your host, Mark Leon Goldberg. I am a veteran international affairs journalist and the editor of UN Dispatch. Enjoy the show. The farmer-herder conflict in Nigeria is a long-running and deadly struggle over land and resources, primarily between nomadic herders, mostly from the Fulani ethnic group, and settled farming communities. Driven by desertification, population growth, and shrinking grazing land, herders increasingly move south in search of pasture, leading to violent clashes with farmers over farmland and water. The conflict has intensified in recent years, contributing to insecurity and displacement, particularly in Nigeria's Middle Belt region. And it was there, in the middle of the night on June 13th, that an unknown group attacked the village of Yelewata. An estimated 200 people were killed, mostly farmers and their families, in what is considered the single deadliest massacre of its kind. The attack sparked a massive public outcry over the government's apparent inability to prevent this kind of violence. Joining me to discuss what is driving this conflict and why Nigerians are increasingly losing confidence in the government's ability to provide security in the Middle Belt region is Isaac Albert, a professor of African history, peace, and conflict studies at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. We begin by discussing the recent attack on Yelewata before taking a broader look at what his research suggests is fueling this conflict and what may be done to prevent massacres like this in the future. And a quick note before we start, as always, please feel free to reach out to me if you have suggestions of people I should interview or topics I should cover. And if you are a paying subscriber to this show, send me an email and I will send you a Global Dispatches sticker in the mail. I have a bunch of them and I'd love to send you one. You can become a paying subscriber by going to globaldispatches.org and upgrading your subscription or following the link in the show notes of this episode. Thank you. Now here is my conversation with Professor Isaac Albert of the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. To kick off, can I just have you explain what we know thus far about what happened in Yelewata, a village in central Nigeria, on the night of June 13th?
What happened at Yelewata is a continuation of the problems that the farming communities in the middle belt of Nigeria have been facing, most especially since the 2015 elections. Now, basically, one would say that movement of animals in Nigeria has been a cause of conflict between the Fulani people and the people of the middle belt of Nigeria. The northern parts of Nigeria has a dry vegetation, but as you move southwards from the north downwards, the first part of the country that you will encounter is what we call the middle belt. Now, the middle belt is a very green area, having a lot of water, as well as vegetation that animals could depend on. Now, in the past, Fulani people driving their animals southwards looking for vegetation usually have conflict with local farmers. But from 2015, I think the conflict assumed what one would call a genocidal dimension, a situation in which the Fulani herdsmen are not just looking for where to graze their animals, but probably communities that could be taken over. So what we witnessed recently is that these communities are invaded by herdsmen, most especially at night. Women, children are killed. But I think this has continued since 2015 because the Nigerian state has not been too active in dealing with the problems. People get killed and no consequences thereafter. So the Yelewata one, as I said, is a continuation of the problems that the people of Benue State have been having.
So can you walk me
The
through
others,
just what we know about what happened in Yelewata, which seems to be a really particularly gruesome example of the conflict dynamics that you just described?
yes, the so-called others invaded Yelewata at night. They set houses ablaze. There were sniper attacks on those who tried to escape from the community, and several people were killed. We do not really have the exact number of people that were killed, but my PhD student, who is from that part of the country, said over 200 people were killed. The official figure is between 50, 70, but the members of the community believe that over 200 people were killed. And it actually ignited what one would call a public protest of the people of Benue State. Now, what we find very quite interesting, and which is a continuation of the problem of state failure in Nigeria, is that those that came out to stage protest against the killings were the ones that were arrested by the police.
Hmm.
You see, when these communities get invaded, there is usually no response from the police or the military. But when the people came out to protest, the Nigerian police came out with helicopters to monitor the protest and to make arrests. And the people see it as part of what they consider to be, well, I don't want to say state collusion, but I think what one could say at best is that there is a state, the state lacks the capacity to protest. And
Hmm.
I think that is what really happened.
I mean, you're
Yes,
describing a really horrific attack as
yes,
well as an ineffectual state response, and frankly, a state response, as you describe
exactly.
it, that targeted more the victims of this horrible attack than the perpetrators.
Yes.
Earlier, you were describing some of the conflict dynamics. Is it your understanding that the herders who attacked Yelewata, this village, killing upwards of 200 people, were essentially trying to drive people out of this village in order to claim their land?
Well, as a professor of security studies, I have my suspicion. The general explanation is that these killer others attack the communities, they take over the communities in some cases, and in some cases they kill and they vanish into the thin air. Now, a number of communities have been occupied by them. And my suspicion is that these others are not just ordinary people. They are motivated, probably from outside, because from my own study, I've discovered that terrorist organizations are pushing southwards. They move in from the Sahel, they escalate the conflict in the north. In the north central, they take communities in some cases. These communities taken are not to be used for any productive activities, but the communities are prevented from farming.
Hmm.
So I think it's a strategy of worsening the food crisis in Nigeria because even when we say they occupy communities, they know that they cannot occupy these communities on continuous basis. But what they do is They frustrate the farmers from planting. They frustrate them from harvesting their crops. In some cases, they set ablaze their stores where food is kept. You have thousands of tubers of yam set ablaze, farms having their crops uprooted and destroyed. So, to me, I think it is more than what we are witnessing. I see a form of terrorism that probably the Nigerian state is yet to understand.
From the perspective of the perpetrators of this
Yeah,
violence, what's the logic in wanting to foment or exacerbate a food crisis by torching farms?
I think what I'm sharing with you is my own academic understanding of what is happening. Because when you come into a community, you set their stores ablaze, you kill farmers, and you know that these farmers come from a section of Nigeria that is called food basket. The middle belt is the food basket of Nigeria. The bulk of the food we eat in Nigeria come from that axis. So when you set their farms ablaze, you kill them. To me, it is an indirect way of exacerbating the problem of food security in Nigeria. But in some cases, some of these others come on air. We have a number of social media posts in which you see them face to face making threats. And the threats that we see from them are that the people of Benue State prevent them from herding their animals, and that they too will prevent the people of Benue State from actually being good farmers. But when you see some of the killings, I think you see signatures of terrorists across the Sahel. The way they kill, the way they set buildings ablaze, and some of the things they do not show that this is an ordinary conflict. I think it is being perpetrated by people who are well trained. And when they attack, the way they attack and retreat from the communities show that they are highly organized. And I do not think these are ordinary people.
Yeah, it's interesting how you say that many of the attacks we're seeing in the Middle Belt bear striking resemblance to some of the tactics that have long been used by terrorist groups, say like Boko Haram and its affiliates
I
in
see Al
the
Qaeda.
northern part of the state.
Yes.
So
Some,
you see
some
some
community
connections
members
between the two.
Some community members also say that some of the attackers that they saw are not the Nigerian Fulani, that in some cases they do not speak English, they do not speak local Fulani language.
Hmm.
So this is an invasion. Now, let me also take you to the heart of the problem. This problem escalated in the year 2015 when President Buhari, a Fulani man, became the president of Nigeria. When people of Benue State started to be attacked, Buhari, the president, blamed the people of Benue State for not being good neighbors to the others. That was his first explanation. But later, he went to the UN and he said those attacking the people of Benue State are terrorists produced by Gaddafi's Libya. That
Hmm.
was what the president said. So, as far back as 2015, the president himself knew that those attacking Benue State are from outside and that they are not the local Fulani people. Because the conflict that we had between the Fulani people and the local farmers in the past, which in academic frame we call other farmers crisis, created rooms for negotiation. But the problem we are having now is that those doing these killings in Benue State are faceless. It is difficult to get them to any negotiation table because they kill and vanish into the thin air. So it is difficult for the people to locate those to negotiate with.
So if negotiation is not an option because you don't know really who these violent actors are, does that suggest that there ought to be a more robust security response from the state? And why thus far has the security response from the state of Nigeria been so lacking and leaving so many of these communities deeply vulnerable to these really fairly consistent attacks that have been happening over the last few years?
The question you're asking me is the question that all Nigerians are asking now.
I'm not even Nigerian.
Yes, you are not a Nigerian. What I'm saying is that Nigerians are asking a similar question,
Hmm.
as to why the state will abandon the people, allow them to be killed so brutally by a faceless group of people. And therefore, the people of Benue State, like other Nigerians, have been asking for the government to give them the power to defend themselves. The argument is that if the state is saying, we cannot protect you, then please allow us to protect ourselves. And if the people of Benue State are saying this, they are saying this on purpose. Benue State has the largest concentration of retired military people in Nigeria, a large concentration of retired military people. They can actually organize their own security, they can fight back. But self-help is unlawful in Nigeria. And on many occasions, Nigerians were forced to surrender the arms in their custody because in Nigeria, it is illegal for you to keep weapons. But what the people are saying now is that whereas the Nigerian state is very efficient in taking back arms from communities, they are unable to prevent invaders of communities from keeping their own arms. Now, following the killings in Yelewata, the president of Nigeria, Tinubu, visited Benue State, and before that visit, the chief of defense staff, General Christopher Musa, actually advised the people of Benue State to organize themselves into vigilance movements and that the government will work with the vigilance movement. But the governor of Benue State rejected that option. Rejected that option by saying that it is the responsibility of the Nigerian state to protect the people. That it is an open sign of state failure for those who should be protecting the people to ask the people to protect themselves. So that suggestion was rejected, and it was made clear to the president that the people of Benue State will not organize themselves into vigilance group to defend their communities. And that probably what the government should do is to respond positively to the yearnings of Nigerians for community policing to be given official approval. Nigerians have been asking for community policing for over 20 years. To say the central policing that we have now is unable to protect different parts of the country. But politicians have always rejected community policing. What they say most of the time is that if community policing is licensed, state governors will use them during political campaigns. But the counter argument is that is the federal police now being used by federal government against other jurisdictions? So the federal police is not controlled by governors. So the president can ask the federal police not to act where they want. So the people are vulnerable because the governor of a state in Nigeria is said to be the chief security officer of the state, but he does not control the police. He does not control SSS. He does not control the army. And so when problems happen, you find governors begging the police, begging the army, begging SSS to come to their support. And in most cases, they do not come.
I mean, it sounds, as you're describing it, like the principal failure, therefore, is at the federal level, that the federal government's response has been just so weak. Is it a capacity issue in your mind, or is it something more deeply political that is preventing the federal government from responding more robustly to this violence?
It is both political and a capacity issue. When Nigeria got our independence in 1960, we opted for a federal system of government. And a federal system of government is, saying that powers will be decentralized. But when we had the coup of 1966, The military decided to turn Nigeria into a unitary state, though we still call ourselves a federal state. Now, all powers are now concentrated at the federal level. The president of Nigeria controls the police, an institution that has limited number of personnel. So the president sits down in Abuja and controls all police protecting Nigeria. The president controls the army, controls secret service, whatever. Now, if you want to look at it as a capacity issue, Nigeria does not have enough people, enough policemen to police the entire country. The number of policemen that we have, so few, to protect a country of over 200 million people. So we have the problem of personnel. But when you look at the few policemen that we have in Nigeria, close to 40% of them do executive protection. An average politician is being followed by 10, 12 policemen. And then you go to some communities, you don't have 10, 12 policemen in the community, but you have more than that number protecting an individual politician. So most of our policemen in Nigeria, they do executive protection. So few policemen, but many of them are engaged in protecting politicians. Then the political aspect has to do with the totalitarian character of the Nigerian leadership. The president controls all the security agencies and he deploys them, he manages them in a way that most of the time fulfills the ambition of regime security. There is difference between human security and regime security. There is also a difference between regime security and national security. What our policemen, what our security agencies are supposed to be doing is to protect all parts of the country. But most of the time, the security agencies give more attention to the parts of the country that are in the good book of the president. So this affects, if you are in opposition party, you are most likely not to get the kind of protection that those in the ruling party will get. The immediate past governor of Benue State was actually in the ruling party, but he was frustrated by the crisis in the state to become a member of the opposition. And today, the opposition controls Benue State.
There's like less incentive for the president to want to bolster security there. Going forward, it seems that like the dynamics as you describe them doesn't look like they're going to change anytime soon, despite, as you noted, in the face of this really horrific massacre in Yelewata and the public outcry against it. Is anything changing at all? And what prospect do you see for increased security there?
The only solution to the problems we are witnessing, not only in Benue State, but all parts of the country, is that Nigeria will continue to have security problems until the different states of the federation are allowed to establish their own security system, until security management in Nigeria is decentralized. Refusal of the Nigerian state to allow state policing, to allow community policing, forced many states of the federation to establish their own vigilance movement. Now, in the southwest part of Nigeria today, you have what is called Amatekun. Amatekun, the word is tiger in Yoruba language. They establish it for themselves. And these people, they go around their communities, they prevent crimes. But because Amatekun is not formally licensed by federal government, these local vigilante groups are not licensed to carry weapons. So that is the missing gap now. In the Southwest, for example, if the federal government authorizes state policing or community policing, now the local groups will be able now to acquire weapons to actually do what they were established to do. They encounter some of these Fulani others, but in most cases, the local vigilance groups are killed because the weapons that the invaders are carrying are usually very sophisticated. And so the communities are unable to fight back. because they do not have the kind of weapons that these people are having. And I think that is what the government is enjoying. The federal government know that the local communities cannot protect themselves and until they do the biddings of the federal government. So it is a method of manipulating the entire country. So Nigeria will become more peaceful when communities are formally allowed to protect themselves. The people of Benue State can defend themselves. In addition to the fact that they have many young people that can fight back, they have many retired soldiers, many retired policemen that can actually put up a very strong fight against anybody entering their communities. But under the Nigerian constitution, they are not allowed to do that.
I suppose in the coming weeks and months, is there anything that you'll be looking towards that will suggest to you whether or not this cycle of violence in the Middle Belt region will simply continue as is?
No, the violence will continue. The violence for now cannot be stopped. You see, one of the attackers came on air, to YouTube, whatever. He dismissed the president's visit as noise making. And he said, after the noise making, we will come back to harvest the rest of you and send you back to your makers. He said, we will ensure that nobody is left in Benue State. I mean, this is an open threat. And our state security officials see this type of videos, but you don't see anybody being arrested. So many of these people carrying out these killings, they know that the Nigerian state does not have the political will to confront the problem. And of course, this was part of the reasons why Boko Haram crisis escalated. We treated with kid gloves, generals, chiefs of army staff that were ready to deal with the problems were called names. They were reported to the United Nations as carrying out genocide. And gradually this conflict escalated. Now it has reached a stage now that the Nigerian state can no longer handle it. The conflict escalated to Cameroon, Chad, Niger. It is now an internationalized conflict. But what I see happening in the nearest future is that if the people wait if they wait and there is no change in government's response to the problem, I actually see a big chaos before us because the people will come out on their own and fight. And I really don't know what the consequences will look like.
Well, Professor Albert, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate this.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Global Dispatches. The show is produced by me, Mark Leon Goldberg. It is edited and mixed by Levi Sharp. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to follow the show and enable automatic downloads to get new episodes as soon as they're released. On Spotify, tap the bell icon to get a notification when we publish new episodes. And of course, please visit globaldispatches.org to get on our free mailing list, get in touch with me, and access our full archive. Thank you.